You're with the Retro Hour podcast, and it's time to welcome on this week's very special guest. Now, today, we're going to be going inside the world of some legendary companies from back in the day, including the 3DO company. A really interesting time at 3DO, actually. We've done episodes before exploring their console and hardware division, but today we're going to be talking about when they were a games publisher, which is not something you hear much about, so we'll get into that. And then TDK's Mediactive division as well in the early 2000s. And then we're going to hear about Rocket Games and then bringing back some legendary Jaleco sports titles as well. So lots of interesting stories over the next hour or so, I'm sure, with our special guest this week, Michael Devine. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. I'm super glad to be here.
Yeah, appreciate you taking the time to do a bit of reminiscing with us, and really interesting what you're doing now as well, you know, keeping these retro titles alive. So, I mean, before we get into all that, there is one question we always like to ask our guests, just to kind of find out where it all began for you. I mean, do you remember when you first encountered a video game? Let's go right back to day one. What's your earliest memory?
Oh, no, 100%. So I graduated college in 1982, not 1882, 1992. And, except for the Atari, which I couldn't afford, the video games really weren't around. And when I got out of school, one of the things I really, as a legacy, realized I was a super bad typist. So I decided to get my first personal computer. I got a Mac the first year they came out. And I didn't realize it, but I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I'm in love with this thing. They only had two programs. They had a writing program and a spreadsheet. And I was like desperate to do anything else with this computer. So lo and behold, what starts to show up? Games. So like, I'm playing like, the Zork trilogy. I'm playing, adventure games. I'm playing there was a store in the US called Egghead Software. And it had all sorts of stuff. And every Friday, new software would come. And so my friend and I would go on Fridays, and we would see if any new games had appeared. And we would grab them, pizza and beer, and play like until 3 or 4 in the morning and like finish them. And really, really excited. And I kind of had an epiphany. I went, games. I love games. I'm passionate about games. I want to be in that business. I had no background. I had nothing except that I just love games. And it took a little bit of time. It actually took about 2-3 years of just knocking on doors. And eventually I got the opportunity to go work for a distributor of all things car stereo equipment. But
wow.
But what was really funny, it's a kind of a funny story, is this company based in Orange County in Los Angeles, in greater Los Angeles, they had a rep who came to them the Christmas before and said, hey, do me a favor to these people. And they said, what? They said, well, we're representing this company called Nintendo, and this is the first year that they're out. And we really want to move some product and distribution. Would you guys be willing to take like a few hundred units and just have them on consignment? And if they don't sell after Christmas, we'll take them back. And so they brought in 600 units. I wasn't there yet. They brought in 600 units. And evidently the owner called the rep right after Christmas and said, hey, do you have any more of those like Nintendo things? And he's like, why? Well, we offered them for a day and we sold all 600. And so they went into the business. And like 2.5 years later, I became their game buyer. And I actually, one of the first people I met to expand their business was a rep for EA. And EA was just kind of starting out. They'd been doing all those Jordan versus Bird and like airplane or paper airplane construction, all that kind of stuff. But they were going to get into the Genesis business. We signed them up. We signed Sega up. We signed Neo Geo up. We signed, oh my gosh, what can I think of it? NEC TurboGrafx. I mean, all of that. And it was amazing. And then I just jumped a couple years later to actually getting a call from, and we signed up 3D, we signed up, what was I going to say? EA. I said, so the EA rep came in and said, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to Sega. And my position is going to be open. Would you have any interest in like interviewing for the Western regional rep for the 3DO company. And I was like, well, let me go talk to my wife. And I said, I went to my wife. I said, it's less money. I'm not sure what the future would be, but this is my chance to jump into games full time. I really, really, really want to do it. And she said, okay, fine, go interview. Well, the guy running sales at 3DO at that time had just come from TurboGrafx, where I had just worked with them. And I met him for lunch, and he was like, oh yeah, I know you. If you want it, take it. So, and then I was there 7 years.
I was just wondering then, so the first one you mentioned that you were distribution and sales manager, a video game buyer for CSD. I was wondering what that transition from being a gaming fan to kind of getting that job was. How did you get in there? And then what did you learn when you were in that role?
Well, so that's a really interesting question. And I've always had a dichotomy because I could not program my way out of a bathtub, and I could not draw my way out of a color form program. So I had no skill when it came to developing games. But I've always had decent business acumen. And so being able to apply my knowledge at that time to something that I loved actually was like kid in a candy store. It was just so much fun coming up with the strategies to expand the business, to go to chains, to explain to them, why it made sense for them to add the category or to add, a Genesis or 3DO or Neo Geo, which blew my mind when it came out. I mean, it just blew my freaking mind. And I really liked it. And one of the things that for me personally, I can sell stuff, but I have to really be passionate about it. I mean, and a lot of people, selling's great and they make great money and do all that. I get really bored if I'm not really just feeling like this is the greatest thing ever. I just want to do this. That's how I felt my entire career from the minute I got into that first job about being in the video game world. I love the games. I love the product. I love the people. Most of my friends in the business are developers, and 3DO acquired a company called New World Computing, which had some of the best games on the planet, like Heroes of Might and Magic and Might and Magic and all that. And I became really, really tight with them because we had a shared love. So that was it. It was just basically looking at all the stuff there and realizing that this is something I was really, really, really interested in. Something like that, a rep would come in because not everything is like, hey, we have NES. Do you want some on consignment? Someone had sold the owner 5,000 Mattel Power Gloves. And I guess, yeah. Oh, wow. Exactly. And so, and so I walked in and I'm like, what's that? Point in, it's like, oh, that's just, I don't know, they're just like all these stuff we bought and we don't know what to do with it and blah, 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 blah. And so I just figured out how to start making bundles. And, it's like, because the NES action sets, the ones with the Mario and the gun, in the box, became like the hottest ticket in the world. And so we would sell people stores like, well, if you want an action set, you got to get a Power Glove. You got to buy another game. Yeah. And we went through the inventory and the company didn't lose money on it. And so I felt good about it. And years later, I think Power Gloves were in movies or something like that. So
I remember they're in The Wizard, weren't they? And they said it was really bad. I remember. I think they meant bad as to mean good, but we all knew the truth really about the Power Glove.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's whole videos like showing people like spending an hour figuring out how it worked and twisting their hands. And like all of us, right? For the first 10 minutes, it's like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then about 10 minutes past that, you go, God, this sucks. God.
Yeah. Once you try to use the thing, yeah.
Yeah, that was Power Glove in a nutshell.
Well, let's get into your time at 3DO then. So, I mean, I remember hearing about 3DO when it came along with the interactive multiplayer, and it was meant to be a video game system that would be a standard set of hardware. Lots of different companies could make their own, almost like VHS was to video. So, I mean, when did you first become aware of 3DO, and what did you think of their initial vision that they had with the console?
Well, I first became aware when I was doing distribution, and I think the system, if I remember correctly, came out at $700. And they brought a very, very small shipment from Panasonic, because there were multiple people who manufactured it. The 3DO company did not actually manufacture their own game system. They had partners that did it. The biggest ones were Gold Star and Panasonic. And anyway, so they came out the Christmas of, I can't remember, it was 84 or 85, I guess, so whatever it was, they came out, and they only brought, I don't know, a really small quantity into the US, and they sold out immediately. And so everybody thought this is going to be like crazy. So, but then, it took them a long time to get back in stock. It took more, I think, maybe 6 months or more. And then when they did, 700 really wasn't a very competitive price. And the thing was, the idea was amazing. Nobody was doing, CD-based stuff. The drives weren't fast enough. The capacity wasn't fast enough. There were lots of issues. You could do things like you could have video in games, but at about, 15 frames per second. And so it wasn't entirely successful. But yeah, I really thought it was amazing. And what was interesting about 3DO, well, a lot of things. I mean, one is, I got to say, first and foremost, meeting and working a bit with Trip Hawkins was one of the absolute highlights of my career. I mean, I hate it when people use superlatives that are just overused. I really think the term genius is way overused. Now with Trip Hawkins. Trip Hawkins is a visionary and a genius, and his ideas and concepts of where he wanted to take 3DO from that basic system were so far beyond what anybody else was doing. In fact, when the company wound up getting sold, they had a 64-bit system that was basically almost ready to roll. It was called the M2.
Yeah, that was the M2, wasn't it?
Yeah. And but the company just wasn't making any money on the software because and some of the games were good, but many of the games just didn't work well in that limited system. They also invested a lot in MPEG compression technology, and we're kind of light years ahead on that as well. But the trouble was, by that point, the company had 700-800 employees, and had bought 2 or 3 different studios that were, doing some great stuff. But it just, honestly, at the end of the day, in retrospect, it wasn't on the right system. And so we made this transition. I mean, it was just by the skin of the company's teeth. We made the transition from being a system company to a software company.
At that point, yeah, you're right. You did move from the kind of system, and I think there were so many rivals out at the time as well. Everyone was trying to make that breakthrough into the CD console market. You mentioned the M2 there. I was wondering, did you see much of it? How far along was it? And
I mean, again, I was in the sales division and I was remote. I was living in Southern California, so I would go up once a quarter, sometimes a little more than that. And we had a big sales team for a pretty small company, like 9 or 10 people in the sales department. And so we would see things. And I think the last CES, they were doing some behind closed doors demos on it. And I mean, again, we are in a world of like Switch 2 and PlayStation 5 right now, but basically at the time the M2 was mind blowing. I want to say they had a racing scenario, and it was so smooth and it looked so good. And I think all of us in the company were dying to have the opportunity to do it, but the company was never structured or funded to become a manufacturer. It just wasn't. And reality is having multiple partners, like I said, like Samsung and then and like Panasonic, and I guess the AT&T was involved for a minute or two. The trouble was that, they couldn't put big money behind marketing or at spends, because those companies were really interested in moving boxes. They didn't care what they were. They didn't care whether they were a VCR, a car stereo, or a game system. And for them, It was just a small blip on their plan. And I really mean that, just a blip. For us, it was life and death. It was just, we were so passionate about what we were doing. And so the company contracted mightily after we sold all that technology and wound up having a little bit of cash. And there was about a year where we were in development on everything, but we made nothing. And then we came back as a much, much smaller company and PlayStation 1 had launched by then. We had a minuscule marketing budget for the Christmas that the PlayStation came out. We couldn't compete with it. They came out at the time, and it was a $50 million marketing budget. Wow. And they just went from zero to being the leader virtually overnight in terms of the next generation. So we knew that the writing was on the wall, but, we came back with a number of the Studio 3DO came back with a number of amazing games. Army Men was a huge hit, and I think had 147 variations and additional games that came out. We had Trip is a passionate baseball fan. I mean, just amazing. And so we came out with High Heat Baseball. And honestly, and I don't say this as a former 3DOer, it was the best baseball game on the market. It was the most realistic. And it got amazing reviews, but it always wound up being fourth in the market because we just didn't have the capital behind it. I through luck of circumstance and just kind of the river flowing, I mean, I went during that almost 7-year period from Western Regional Sales Manager to VP of Sales and wound up getting an opportunity to go all over to Toys R Us and, Walmart and Best Buy and EB and all those places. And what I found really interesting in those meetings wasn't so much whether I was a good salesperson or not, or whether the company had great games. We did. But what I found was really interesting is those buyers, the vast majority of them, these are the people that were controlling the sales and dollars of our industry. Yeah. Most of them didn't come from our industry. At Walmart, the video game buyer had come from like Garden Hose, and they would just, and they'd rotate people in, and like same thing at Target and all these people. And so when people came in, and our team were all like me and me like them, and that we were all just gamers. And so we come and have these meetings, and we would just be going nuts telling these buyers how amazing these games were and what the market was like and what we were doing. And the buyers really, really liked it. And so we got more market share than maybe we might have otherwise, just because of the fact that we were all gamer centric. And so, we did well, but in the end of the day, the business had some issues. And
I'd love to hear about kind of that when 3DO made the decision to transition from a hardware designer, you could say, making consoles to software only. And obviously you mentioned, meeting all these companies to try and get the games distributed. After their, their failure in the console market, you could say, I mean, was it difficult to get retailers to put trust in the brand? Did it feel a bit like it was a bit of a poison chalice to some of them at the time?
Well, we never say failure. We say issues, and or challenges. Because I am sales. I mean, I'm sorry. I just had to put that out there.
Of course.
But, not really, because most of those larger companies had not even tried 3DO, the 3DO game system. It had never been in their stores. That was more of a, I can't remember it, GameStop, electronic boutique. I can't remember. I can't remember the full distribution of it back then, because then when I joined, I was just doing the West, and we didn't have a lot of the chains in the West that ultimately were carrying it. But no, they didn't. Sometimes we would use like Trip as kind of a high fashion model. I mean, everybody knew who Trip was. Even the buyer at Walmart knew who Trip was. And so occasionally he would come on some of those first trips. Actually, I think he did a lot that on when the 3DO launched. But even when we changed the software, he came on those trips, and he was dazzling in presenting and told a great story about vision, and it got us in a lot of doors.
I think it's pretty amazing that, the PC games division, you went from, $0 profit to $3 million in 18 months, which is really, really fast. And
I think it was, did you say 3 million?
Yeah, it's in revenue.
I think it was closer to 80.
80. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So
no, it was the second year we were out, we hit a pretty high bar. It was. And I will say, one of the acquisitions, because we had a lot of acquisitions in that company. The best one by far is we acquired, the software, the PC game company, New World Computing, because they were just best of class, and their products were our best selling. I mean, the Might and Magic 3 was one of the best selling titles 3DO ever had, and we anyway. So Trip had a really good eye for talent, and he had a really good eye for creators, and I think that really helped us as a company. The other thing I was going to say, I have found in working on a national level in the U.S., sometimes really small companies can get in places that really big companies can't, because the bigger companies, there's a quid pro quo, right? The buyers expect something from your company. They expect you to put $5 million in advertising, or expect, to have an exclusive on some huge product. But when you go in as a smaller company that has a good pedigree, they're just going to take your product because they know that that's what you're offering. And so in some ways, I think it was easier.
I think like looking at someone like Sega, who's also gone from, hardware to software, they have a great set of resources and, a lot of talent that was already there that could instantly kind of go into this area. Do you think that was the case with 3DO as well?
I think so. I think we wanted to bring on a lot more once we became a studio. I know we brought on a lot more. We had hundreds of people working in development in companies that we acquire. Unfortunately, that also raises the bar on what you have to earn. And it means that it's not 100,000 units is not, a small company. It's like, let's go pop the champagne. And like a small company, it's like, oh crap, we can't pay our bills next month. I mean, it's just, and I think there was a little bit of that going on. So, but yeah, I mean, we had a very good pedigree. We had some initial hits right out of the gate. They weren't major hits, but they were solid, and people were definitely willing to ride with us. But at the end, I think we had close to 1,200 people in the company, and that's a big nut. And so it was. I just think we couldn't overcome it. But it is what it was.
I think as well, you touched on, some of it's quite a diverse catalogue of titles you had as well. Strategy games like Heroes of Might and Magic on the PC, and then the Army Men games on the consoles as well. I mean, it's quite interesting, that balance as well, because often you find with a lot of studios, they'll either focus on just consoles or maybe PCs. How did it kind of work, balancing between basically selling hardcore PC games to more casual console gamers? Was there a difference there?
Well, I think there was a strategy into what we wanted to do, but also it was we acquired in many cases entire studios. And they came in with a expertise, and they came in, genre specific, and so we were able to use that to help them make the games that they were really best at. I mean, we could go on for 5 hours on some of the deep dives we took on particular games for a particular reason, but we weren't always the most successful. Sometimes it was like, the guys that knew how to make the first Army Men game just knew how to make a good game like that. And some other things. I mean, we did, in the old 3DO days, I mean, one of my favorite pieces of software was Killing Time. And we all love Killing Time. And, that was done by a studio that was another studio that we acquired. I believe it was Cyclone Studio, that went under the Studio 3DO umbrella, and it was just fun and accessible and could work under the original 3DO game system. But that was all the talent. It wasn't, people weren't coming in and sort of plugging into projects per se. It was more that we would hire studio heads and directors and creatives that already came in with particular talent, and we tended to lean on them. And, on the other hand, one time at midnight, in the third or fourth year of the company, we had just had a sales meeting, and one of the guys was from Europe, and we were both playing a game called Meridian 59, which was one of the precursors to World of Warcraft and everything else. And we were actually texting in the game as we were killing giant spiders, and we thought it was earth-shattering that we could be playing a game a continent apart and actually texting each other at the same time.
A little glimpse
But
of the future there, yeah.
it was a glimpse of the future. It was like, yeah. And it was really true. It's not a euphemism. There were just, you walk around the first like buildings and there was these giant spiders you had to kill. And we thought it was the coolest thing ever. So
Were
anyway.
there any 3DO projects that kind of didn't make release, that were cancelled, that were really exciting?
Yeah, there were a ton, but it's honestly, it is a long time ago now. And it was, I was always really focused on selling some of the new stuff. I think I want to say, and I don't want to say stuff that's wrong. So I want to be really careful, but I think we were working in MPEG 4 compression at the time. We wound up selling that technology. And we saw we had some early stuff that was sort of demoing it. And it was really, really cool because again, today I've got a 75-inch, big screen in my den, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. I mean, when I started in the game business, I had a 25-inch color TV and thought that was the best thing ever. And it's 260 lines of resolution. So things change. But yeah, no, I mean, I think most of anything that we didn't produce at that point was just stuff that was either on the drawing board or early development. And I was just really busy selling the next things that were going to come out, and our team was doing that, and et cetera.
Well, you mentioned about the big expansion of 3DO and maybe expanding a bit too far. I know you left in 2001. So, what was kind of your journey from leaving 3DO? Because you joined TDK's Media Active division as well. So, what was kind of your journey between the companies then? What happened?
Well, so it's really funny when you're in a business or a position or whatever, and you just truly love it, and then it's just not there. Because we went through like 6 or 7 downsizings the last year and a half of the company, and I think I was part of downsizing number 4. and I just remember I was gutted. I was gutted just because I loved what I was doing so much, and I started making phone calls because by that time we had like 3 kids and a mortgage, and even though gaming's fun, you've got to work, and it was really weird. I started looking around right away. I mean, I really needed to get the next job, and I went on an interview with this company, and they were this super small company, I think called SoundSource Interactive, and they had like done stuff like audio for Trekkie games and a couple of other things, and they were quite small. And they had just been acquired by the TDK company of Japan. They had decided they wanted to get into the game business. They wanted to put a tent pole in America, and they decided to do it in Aurora Hills or wherever it was, California. And they did it. And so suddenly that company, now TDK Interactive, was looking to expand, and they interviewed me, I think, to be their VP of sales, and I got it. So it was like 30 plus days after I left 3DO. Suddenly I was driving out an hour and a half each way every day from Long Beach to Agora Hills to be part of that company. That company, unlike TDK, was very license driven, but also very opportunistic. And they had an Aquaman property that they were working on, and a couple of other projects. Eventually, they would do Robotech, the first video game version of Robotech, which actually is very cool and was the biggest title for that company. But there was this one game that really helped the trajectory, and that was DreamWorks. Who had a really successful run, had a lot of video game contracts. They had this new movie coming out, and I think it was Activision had first rights, the video game rights, and they passed on it. And then I think EA had something in line, and they passed on it. Nobody wanted to be involved with this movie called Shrek, and so TDK basically got the rights to make a Game Boy game based on Shrek. called Shrek Kart Racing. Yeah, okay. It's just the way it sounds. It's like putting the Shrek characters in a Game Boy racing game. Okay. The company, I think, sold 250,000 copies of it.
Yeah, it's a
And
blockbuster.
suddenly, like we were on the map, and people were talking to us, and so we wound up growing, pretty fast. And I think the second year I went on and ran the sales and marketing for the company, and we were doing quite well. But I think that they didn't want. It was hard because they were very, very small, and at that time, Take-Two was looking to do some acquisitions, and they also wanted to be, I guess, in California, and they just swooped in at the last, not the last second, but the end of the second year I was there, and acquired the company. So the company was like a blip on the sun. It was just red hot for like a minute or 2 years, and then suddenly, boom, they were gone. And Take-Two grabbed the studio. Most of the people go. It wound up, I think, becoming the home of Take-Two Sports. And a lot of the people that had been at TDK wound up working for them for Take-Two. But it was a lot of fun working at that company. It was a creative company. We had a lot of flexibility, and like I said, we had some really, really nice stuff. Robotech being, pretty high up there.
I think that Shrek's really interesting because the film itself had a lot of troubles when it kind of started, because Chris Farley was meant to be the voice of Shrek, and then originally did some clips and stuff, and then passed away, and then Mike Myers came in and stuff, and it had a kind of a change, like it wasn't really going to happen. So maybe it kind of got cast aside a bit, and people didn't have so much confidence in it. So getting that license was a good move.
That blip lasted a millisecond, because as soon as the movie got big, all those big companies came back in and said, "Yeah, no, we want we want the rights." So
that's it.
Yeah, and it worked out fine for everybody. I still have a copy of Shrek Kart Racing up in my attic. I've never given up any Nintendo system I ever had. I still have every system ever. In fact, my Pokemon Sun is near and dear to my heart. It's right on my desk. It just stays there forever.
I was wondering then, because TDK also went on a licensing spree with obviously DreamWorks for Shrek, Pirates of the Caribbean as well with Disney, and Jim Henson's Muppets Workshop as well. Actually,
you remember my career better than I do. Oh my God, yeah, no, I got to go on the red carpet at the Haunted Mansion opening. That was really fun, actually.
Oh,
yes,
wow.
We did all that. You're right. We did all of that. And Pirates was a good title. The Pirates side was a very good title for us. Again, Game Boy. We were kind of put there. We could do all sorts of things, but licensing wise, that would kind of, for that 2 minutes, that's where we wound up. But you're right. Yeah.
I was wondering how you kind of approach those licensing deals and titles, because movies and video games previously weren't the partners hand in hand, but then later on, movie games started to get better. Franchises started to understand gaming markets more.
You know what? Our CEO was very, very shrewd at TDK, Vince Patetti, and he definitely worked the studios pretty hard. You have to be when you're so small. And he would find the scraps, and some scraps were bigger than others. And then I would come in, I'd usually sit at the room when the meetings were there, and we would negotiate and do all that. But once they were done, then the creative team would take over. And because I then got involved in marketing, I got involved in that. And I'll tell you what, it was super interesting to watch how Disney worked versus how DreamWorks worked versus how Harmony Gold, who had the rights to Robotech, worked. All these different companies had such a different process. I mean, you would think DreamWorks, coming from the background of those guys, would be very, very similar at that point to how they approached video games and licensing and all of that, versus Disney. They really weren't. I mean, Disney was already a well-oiled machine a little bit like Goodfellas. It's like, oh, you're late. I'm not going to say the next words, but you know where that goes.
Yeah, they had high standards. I can imagine. Yeah,
we were just kind of wanting to know how things were going and how the production was going, and so they were very, very different to work with, but we made good product. I mean, it was actually they were for the time they were very good. In fact, the Haunted Mansion game on was it PS2 at that point? I'm trying to remember. It was actually a really, really interesting game, and there were a lot of puzzles in it that were very well done. So, and those were really small teams, and this was no 3DO. I mean, we didn't have. I don't think we had 100 people in the entire company. And we were working on sometimes 6-7 projects simultaneously. But there were a lot of really, really good ideas there. And I really wish TDK had not needed that acquisition when they did for the reasons they wanted, I should say. Because I think if we had been able to get past year 2, I think we could have hung around a lot longer. But I will say, I was commuting round trip 4 out of 5 days a week, 130 miles.
Yeah,
and
that gets to you after a while.
At the end of the second year, it was hard on my family. It was hard on me. Didn't like the fact that all happened, but you know what? It was definitely for the best. So
I'm thinking of some other titles that they had. I mean, obviously, I guess there's quite a lot riding on having licensed games from these big companies like Disney and DreamWorks. I mean, obviously not every licensed game is going to be a Shrek-sized hit. I mean, were there any franchises that you ended up doing deals with that you thought were going to be massive but actually ended up underperforming?
Yeah, I mean, Aquaman didn't turn out to be a very good game, and that was way before the movie franchises, before the DC universe had really taken off in the movies, and so that one was not as successful. We really didn't do a lot of independent stuff because being a super small company, we needed every project to hit, and not every project did hit. But that was one of the ones I remember as not being really good. What I will say though is, again, what we did, and I inherited the people when I took over marketing. God, we had some amazing brand managers. I mean, one went off to be really high up at DreamWorks. Another one was at Warner Brothers for 7 or 8 years. I mean, these were real pros. And they really knew how to bring a licensed product, to market. I mean, at 3DO, the quality of the game really was everything. Once in a while, to our detriment. I mean, I think TDK, trying to be the legend that could, we were really, the bottom line was really important to us. And even if a title was successful, if it wasn't successful enough, we just didn't have a lot of padding. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if you can find, I don't know what it's worth, but you can find an Aquaman, PS2 Aquaman. It's, I don't know if you really want to play it, but I do remember in development, seeing it in a couple of us senior people looked at it and we were just like, what does he do? We see him swimming around a lot. He's not really what's the action here? Like, what happens? And then they kind of added, or at least my memory, they added some sound waves so you could actually kind of shoot some I don't know if that's sonar waves, I should say. Yeah, it didn't help a lot, but yeah.
Interestingly, you started going into releasing classic games as well. So with Ziggurat Interactive, what was it like going from the modern titles to kind of helping release some new classic games, and why were these needed to be released?
Well, that's a great question. So, after I went to an Australian company after TDK, Imagination Entertainment, and they were just starting out to do DVD kind of board games, and I was only there a year. It was more of a toy gig than a game gig, and I wasn't well suited for that. But then I kind of went through a period where I really wasn't. I was doing a bunch of startups in the game industry, and then in 2013, that Christmas, I bought myself a Neo Geo mini system, and I thought it was the coolest thing since sliced bread. I could not believe how fun it was. The experience was great. And then about, I don't know, that spring, about 5, 6 months later, I noticed I wasn't hearing anything about it. It's like, well, what happened? This is like so cool. I happen to vaguely know the owner of the company, Tomo. And so I emailed him and said, hey, I know you guys, congratulations on the Neo Geo system. I love it. I bought one. This is really great. But I know you're not doing anything. I think I have some really good, strong marketing ideas that might help. And so he interviewed with me. I interviewed with him. And yeah, I was there 7 years. And that was all about the retro experience. And we did some stuff with some Japanese companies and brought some things over, like the Raiden series, and that was really, really cool. But we did acquired some titles, and one of them was Bubsy. And yeah, don't smile, don't laugh. I'm very.
Oh, no,
I don't mind Bubsy.
We talk a lot about Bubsy on this podcast. Yeah.
So we got Bubsy, and I was a kid in a candy store. I was just like, oh, we're going to make a new Bubsy game? Oh my God, this is like amazing. And if you go back and look at some of the stuff we did, I guess it was on X by then. Yeah, it was. Yeah, we created a backstory on Bubsy. We did all sorts of things you could do because back then in the day, right, when the games were new, you had to fill in so many of the blanks from the actual gameplay is to like give background and give characters, more than just a written line. So yeah, we created a scenario that Bubsy had gone to Europe to make really bad B movies, and that's how he was like making his living. And we made posters like The Good, Bad, and the Bubsy, and all sorts of really weird stuff. And anyway, we released it. It was okay, but we decided to make a second one, so we released that. And what happened was that and that had gone on for years, and we also had acquired the rights to. Oh God, now my memory's getting taxed. There's Humongous Entertainment, and so we wound up working with this really young developer, this really upstart guy who had lost the bid to get Humongous Entertainment. A guy named Stephen Kick with his brand new studio Night Dive, and he was like, I talked to him, and he was like, hey, I can really help you with this. And if you guys don't have the technology, I can get these games like on modern consoles, PC, everything. He was so excited. This is before he became so huge that planets can't hold him. But and we wound up releasing like 33 titles, and we had a PC version that was all 33 titles for like $99. And at the time, retro was definitely current. It's always current. Retro's always current, but it wasn't where it is today. And it became our number one seller. People wanted to spend $100 to get a hold of all those Humongous Entertainment titles. And through all of that, years later, I wound up meeting a guy named Wade Rosen. And I'd been introduced to him just as a guy. He's a guy who's really, really interested in video games. And he's really interested in getting into the business. And I was already old by then. I mean, not ancient like today, but I was pretty damn old. And I took the call. And normally when people say they want to get in the business, I'm nice. I talk to them. But you always go, okay, you don't know what you're doing. This is never going to happen. Talking to him in that first hour, I'd never met someone who knew more about retro games than Wade Rosen. And when I say knew, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I remember that game. It was like he could tell the stories. He could tell the gameplay. He could tell of almost any game you mentioned. It was insane. And so I wound up doing a deal, helped him do a deal to acquire like the first couple hundred titles before he had a company. And he said, it was in 2019. He said, okay, well, now I've got 150 titles and, and I don't even have a company yet. Why don't you come join me? And I said, yeah. So I went over to Ziggurat, and to long story short, to your question, Robbie, I really cut my teeth in being 100% into retro there. And we published on Steam and GOG over 170 titles in about a 3-year period.
Wow.
That was insane. And then we started to make new versions like of the Blob and um, God, Blood Rain. Blood Rain actually wound up doing really, really well for us. I mean, we just through kind of a fluke got Crush, Kill, and Destroy, which I was crazy about because on PC I was all about those real-time strategy games, and we did pretty well. They weren't making new games, mostly making new games at that point. Although we did make Slave Zero, and that was really exciting. So when I left there, and I was thinking about retiring, and I said, I think I'm not quite ready to retire, but I know I'm not ready to work for anybody else ever. I've had 40 years of it. I'm kind of done, but the retro space is where I feel I belong. I've been there since it was just called games, not retro games.
Yeah.
And I started, I started Rocket, with 2 partners, and then we have been working with developers to really bring stuff back to life that have not been there before, or creating curated versions of games so that we take a lot of the modern, not just conveniences, but improvements in how games work. And we started releasing those games, and it's just been a blast.
I know that's kind of your company motto, isn't it? It's capture the essence of retro gaming while embracing the innovative spirit of the indies. So, which I think is a really good approach to doing what you do. I mean, how do you kind of balance that nostalgia with new ideas and when you're selecting projects?
Well, I think, part of it is, what's your source material? Do you actually, so many games, original code are lost, just lost. You wind up like finding like discs or development prototypes from, 30 plus years ago, and they were in somebody's garage for 30 years. And then you go try to make them read anything, and they're just blank. I mean, old DVDs are not meant to, be cold in the winter, hot in the summer, compressed on top of 100 other things. And so a lot of the original source material is gone. So then you're faced with, what can you strip out of the actual, printed version? In some cases, maybe you can use an emulator to start. Some cases, you may be able to figure out a way to take those assets and make them work through Unreal or Unity. But they all have costs associated with them. And then I think with the stuff we just released this last week with the Jalico Sports product, we were able to put the games back together and play them. But when you have like an NES experience, or even a Super NES experience, or a Sega experience, and you go back and you play them, not the hardcore retro fans, but the more casual retro fans, which are a big chunk of the base, they don't want to enter a 20-digit save code. I don't want to enter a 20-digit save code.
You need those conveniences, don't you?
Yeah,
those kind of modern.
You really do.
Yeah.
And so we could have put those games out a year ago almost. And we spent a year really, really working to say, well, what could we add to the experience which doesn't change the way the game plays, but it allows you to experience in some degree the way you're used now to playing games. So like on Bases Loaded and Goal, we did a couple of things. One of them is we added a modern save function. So that you didn't, the original games needed long codes. And then once we got into it, and that's with the Sickhead Studios out of Texas and Tom Spillman. Those guys are amazing. They said, well, we've gone that far. We probably can do a rewind. Huh? And so, rewind was, you hit a button and you go back 7 seconds or whatever it is. And so if you miss that penalty kick, you can do it over again. That's really cool. And even though these are single player games, we also added, we added these leaderboards so that, we couldn't do real time leaderboards and gameplay, but we could do who has the most home runs this month, or who has the most goals, or who has the most this, and those boards like stay up for a month, or we have a CTR mode in the games where if you really want to play it like you're playing a 1985 television, it can look exactly like that.
I love these kind of quality of life improvements, because I always think when you have a release that's been redone, it's not just, packaged and put on a disc. Having all these extra things, especially stuff like achievements as well, is really important. And also having the Jaleco library with the sports titles, there's a huge area of nostalgia as well. Which titles have you released for them?
Well, the original Bases Loaded and Original Go, we actually released about, I don't know, 8-9 months ago, maybe a little longer, on GOG and on Steam. And we got a lot of feedback from people on what they liked and what they didn't like. And so it was we kept on improving it. We kept on adding additional elements to it. We wound up adding the Japanese versions of a lot of the games to it as well. We curated the original manuals so they could be online. We try to add a lot, for the consumer. And then when we kind of had it where we really wanted it, then we decided to bring it over to console, to Switch where they originally were, and also to PS5. And they're doing really well. They've only been out for 5 days and people are really responding to them. We have the complete series. We have Bases Loaded, 1 through 4 or whatever it is. We have the multiple goals. We haven't announced anything yet, but we do have those licenses and we never stop working. So we also have we have the license for Hoops, the basketball game. We have the license for the Pro Sports Hockey series. We feel like adding as much value as we can at the right price is sort of the key to have these games being successful. So you see what we did on the first 2 is NES, Super NES, Japanese where we could get it, adding all these features so that you're not just getting, hey, look, you can play it just like you did on the NES, this one game from 10 years ago. That doesn't seem to be what really motivates people. They want a full experience. So I think what you'll see from us over the next 6 months is you'll see probably 3 more releases of game packs.
Yeah.
That'll be very similar to this. There'll be multiple games in one pack, all with the theme. Right now we're doing sports. We're looking to expand beyond that because we love these games. And then if they're successful, who knows? You might actually see a physical release for Jaleco Sports. But
that'd be amazing. I think it's amazing that people have these really modern, powerful systems, and they're going back to the old school games. But using those advantages as features. I remember Dan. When he got his PS5, instantly he was telling me what he was downloading and playing.
The Atari 50 collection, yeah.
Stuff like that.
Oh God, yes. Well, or, I don't tell my wife when I buy these things. They just show up and she has no interest in video games. So I just what's that box? It's a game system or whatever. But yes, no, it's great. Actually, it took me a while because it's not cheap, but I did acquire a Switch 2. And it's very cool. I mean, it's very, very, very cool. And when you're playing it on a big screen, as you guys already know, the games are really, really fantastic. But yeah, the install base on PS5 is pretty awesome, and actually the system is pretty awesome.
Have you found that there's a new audience of younger people trying these out as well? I was actually in a coffee shop today and I heard a dad telling his son about Lilac Wars and saying, this is what we used to play, and if you get this, we can play it on the new console, which is pretty mad.
There's probably, it's really hard to say I don't have enough data to say what the mix is between old school retro fans, retro fanatics, and casual retro fans. But I think like everything else in consumable content, the casual fan is really where your audience is in terms of just the number of people that are in that category. And yeah, they want accessibility. They want to have fun. If you can make it something that they're going to play for an hour plus rather than for 5 minutes, and just they have the nostalgia factor, then then you got something. And that's what we try to do. We try to make it so that they're going to really enjoy this experience and want more, not just get a taste of nostalgia. And also, a lot of the really old stuff takes enough curation that you're going to have to spend the time anyway. So why not add things without changing the core gameplay to give the fans a better experience?
One thing I say that you're quite big on, and you've touched on it a couple of times actually, is physical releases. And on your website, it says digital licenses expire while physical media becomes a legacy. I mean, do you think, obviously, digital downloads are kind of dominating now. Do you think it's important for maybe the retro collector community? Do you think physical media still got a place?
It is a shrinking place, but it's absolutely a place. I think, we're seeing maybe 80+% gravitate towards digital of, retro fans wanting that content versus maybe 20% that want physical. It elevates if you have special editions with, in the box items that they really, really want to collect. But, the technology is not on physical side. I mean, it's just not. It's, if you, this is my office, but I mean, you can, there's my Switch games. I mean, it's like they're either, for some reason, Nintendo's always been the one I tend to collect, but yeah, I mean, but that's important to me. That's important to my friends, but not
drives. Like drives are disappearing from consoles and stuff like that,
Yeah. And I think, there's been a big controversy, and I think it's relatively big, on, people doing a older game on Switch 2, but it's a key card. And so, and I'm glad, honestly, I'm really glad that fans are basically hating it because then they don't own it. They really don't.
It's not as satisfying taking a key card home, is it?
It's not as satisfying at all. But, but we would be kidding ourselves if we said that there's still this robust growing market. It's a steady market. New people are always getting into it, but I think it's really kind of stable at where it's at. And I think that makes it harder for really casual retro games to get a physical offering. It is. I mean, the Nintendo in particular has a relatively high bar on how many you have to produce. And so you got to do a lot of math on it to see if it works. The classics, I think people still look for it. And yes, I can't say it enough. If you have the right items in the box, people will gravitate towards it and they'll want to do it.
100%. Well, Michael, loving the work that you and the team are doing at Rocket Games. Anything we should look out for then? Anything you can mention that's kind of coming up from Rocket?
Well, if you go to our webpage, you will see an announcement but no details on Marvel's Cosmic Invasion. You'll hear more about it in the next several weeks and what we're going to do. It's a new game. I admit it, but it's a new game that's really got an amazing look and feel to it. That's very, very reminiscent of a lot of the retro stuff that's out there. You're going to see more from us on Jalico. It's been a really good license for us, and now we're going to put a lot more out there, and we're looking for a lot of things like that as well. We're enjoying the heck out of what we're doing, so I don't think we're going to slow down anytime soon.
Fantastic. Obviously, the holidays are coming up. Hopefully, a lot of people having a week or two off, so very good time to delve into your catalog. Like I said, a lot of these available on the stores as well and on GOG. So I'll link up your website so people can check out your full catalog on there as well and have a look at the work that you and the team are doing there. So
appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to chat to you, Michael. Thank you so much for coming on and being our guest this week.
It was great. Invite me back sometime. We'll do it again.